A company with less than 1% of the browser market filed a complaint that triggered a €500 million fine against the richest software company on Earth. At least, that's what you'd think the scandal was about. Microsoft lost all that money because they forgot to show a pop-up window to 15 million people. Oslo, autumn of 2007, in a modest office near the waterfront. John von Techner ran a small browser company called Opera. His team built a product that was fast, lightweight, and genuinely innovative in ways that the dominant browser simply wasn't. Opera had loyal users who swore by it, people who recommended it to friends at every opportunity. But loyalty doesn't pay the bills when your total share of all desktop computers sits below 1% of the global market. Internet Explorer, meanwhile, held 95% of the entire market for one reason alone. Every single computer sold with Windows came with Internet Explorer already installed, already pinned to the taskbar, already waiting on the desktop the very first moment you turned the machine on. The browser was simply there, and most people never thought to look for anything else. Von Techner believed this arrangement wasn't just unfair, he believed it was illegal under European competition law. So in December of that year, he and his deputy general counsel Jason Hoyda filed a formal complaint with the European Commission in Brussels, arguing that Microsoft was abusing its dominant position by welding its browser to its operating system so consumers never encountered a genuine choice. But he wasn't guessing at the legal theory or hoping regulators would invent something new. 3 years earlier, the Commission had fined Microsoft nearly €500 million for doing the exact same thing with its media player software. I explain cases like this every week. If you want to understand how the biggest companies in the world get caught breaking the rules, subscribe and you won't miss the next one. The Commission opened a formal investigation in early 2008, and what they found confirmed Opera's allegations. But their concern wasn't complicated or buried in legal jargon. It was straightforward, and once you hear it explained, you can never unhear it. Picture someone unboxing a brand new laptop at their kitchen table. They open the lid, Windows loads, and the Internet Explorer icon is right there on the taskbar, already glowing blue. They click it because it's the only browser they can see. Web developers built their sites to work with Internet Explorer first because everyone used it, and everyone used it because it came pre-installed on every single machine they owned. It was a closed loop, feeding itself year after year, keeping every competitor locked outside the walls no matter how good their product actually was. This decision seemed small at the time, but it wasn't. The Commission had already tried forcing Microsoft to sell Windows without its bundled media player back in 2004, with disastrous results. Microsoft complied in the narrowest way possible, releasing a version of Windows called the N Edition. It cost the same price as regular Windows and did strictly less. Retailers refused to stock it because no customer ever asked for a copy, and in total only 1,787 copies were ever sold across the entire European Economic Area. Dust gathered on those boxes in warehouses that nobody visited. So the Commission tried something fundamentally different this time around. Instead of removing the browser from Windows, which had proven useless, they would force Microsoft to offer every user a genuine choice for the first time. Starting in March of 2010, every Windows user in Europe would see a ballot screen appear on their computer. A simple window showing 12 different browsers arranged in a row, with the top 5 displayed in randomized order each time. Users could pick whichever browser appealed to them and install it with one single click, even if they had never heard of any alternative before that moment. 200 million Europeans saw that screen in its first year of operation. If you were using Windows in Europe between 2010 and 2014, you probably saw it yourself. But nobody expected what happened next. The results were immediate, measurable, and impossible to ignore. In the first 8 months alone, 84 million browsers were downloaded through the ballot window. Internet Explorer's share dropped by 2.5% in France within weeks of the screen going live. Opera's downloads more than tripled in several countries practically overnight. Mozilla reported significant growth in new Firefox users tied directly to the ballot screen appearing on people's computers. For the first time in more than a decade, the browser market in Europe was genuinely competitive again, and the remedy was actually working. And the timing of what happened next was almost too perfect to believe. In 2011, Microsoft released a routine software update called Windows 7 Service Pack 1. After that update rolled out to millions of computers across Europe, the ballot screen quietly stopped appearing. 15 million users across the continent never saw the choice window again. For 14 straight months, those people received received Internet Explorer as their default browser, with no alternative ever presented to them. The choice screen was gone, the pop-up had vanished, and there was no hint that other options even existed. Microsoft called it a technical error, but a glitch that lasts 14 months and affects 15 million people is difficult to dismiss as a simple oversight. And no, that's not something made up for dramatic effect. The European Commission itself did not discover the problem until July of 2012, more than 14 months after the ballot had silently vanished from those machines. They opened a new investigation immediately. By October, they had formally notified Microsoft of the breach, and in March of 2013, Commissioner Kroes announced the fine. The fine came to 561 million euros in total. That's the kind of number that makes accountants cry. It was the first time in 50 years of European competition law that a company had been fined specifically for breaking a promise it made to regulators in a negotiated settlement. The fine wasn't for the original abuse of tying the browser to the operating system, and it wasn't for the bundling itself. It was purely and exclusively for failing to show a simple pop-up window to the 15 million people who were legally supposed to see it. Neelie Kroes, the competition commissioner who had personally negotiated the original deal back in 2009, stated publicly that the commission acted because Microsoft did not give users the web browser choice they had committed to provide. Brad Smith, Microsoft's top lawyer and public face throughout the entire proceedings, acknowledged the error and accepted responsibility on behalf of the company. The fine was paid in full, without appeal. Every euro went straight into the general budget of the European Union. Not a single cent was distributed to Opera, Firefox, Chrome, or any of the competitors who had actually been harmed by 14 months of lost visibility on 15 million screens. But here's the detail that everyone missed at the time the fine was announced. By 2013, Internet Explorer's market share had already collapsed from 95% all the way down to less than 20% across the continent. The browser that once dominated every screen in every office and every home across the continent was dying on its own. And the thing that killed it wasn't the regulation or the ballot screen, it wasn't the Commission or Opera or Firefox or any legal remedy at all. It was Google Chrome. Launched quietly in September of 2008 with almost no fanfare, Chrome grew from nothing to become the world's most popular browser by 2012, overtaking every rival on the market. It was faster, cleaner, and updated itself silently without ever asking permission or interrupting your work. Users chose it freely and enthusiastically, exactly the way the Commission had always wanted the market to work. The law arrived to fix a monopoly that was already crumbling under the weight of genuine competition from a product that people genuinely preferred. But the final irony arrived a few years later. Microsoft, the company that spent more than a decade fighting European antitrust regulators and paying billions in cumulative fines, eventually filed its own antitrust complaint against Google for doing similar things with its search engine and its Android operating system. The accused became the accuser. Thomas Vigne, the lawyer who had represented Microsoft's opponents throughout the entire browser saga, called it one of the greatest ironies in the history of antitrust law. The browser ballot obligation expired in December of 2014, 5 years after it began. Microsoft was no longer required to show the choice screen to anyone in Europe, but by then the market had been permanently transformed. Internet Explorer was eventually discontinued entirely, replaced by a new browser called Edge that Microsoft built on Chromium, the same open-source technology that powers Google Chrome. The company that once refused to let users choose a different browser now builds its own browser on a competitor's engine. The case left something much larger behind than a fine or a failed pop-up window. It gave the European Commission a direct blueprint for the Digital Markets Act, a sweeping law passed in 2022 that now governs every major technology platform operating in Europe. Every rule that Apple, Google, Meta, and Amazon follow today about app stores, default settings, and pre-installed software traces its legal ancestry directly back to this single case. A single complaint from a company with 0.65% of the market reshaped how the entire technology industry operates across a continent of 500 million people. Next time you open your browser, whichever one it happens to be, remember that you had that choice, because a tiny company in Oslo with 12 million users decided to challenge a company with more than 1 billion of them. The fine has been paid and the law has been written. The principle it established is now permanent, baked into European statute for every platform and every gatekeeper that follows.